video is to give a clear explanation of how to answer the 12-mark question for the Global Politics paper of Edexcel. Now, this is the only compulsory question in any of the papers, because for paper 1, paper 2, and for the majority of paper 3, you have a choice between either 2 or 3 questions. So this is question 2, and as I said, it's the only one that everyone has to answer. Now, I want to start by saying that the command word is different. So for the international relations question, the command word will be analyze, and by analyze, there are a couple of things that you have to remember. So first of all, when it says analyze, you need to identify whatever is in the question. So if the question is analyze the disagreements between liberals and realists over the likelihood of war and conflict, then that needs to be the issues of that needs to be identified. So you might say, on the one hand, realists believe that conflict is inevitable due to, and then you will exemplify once you've identified the different point, and then you will compare in impact and the implications for these differences, which is where you will get your AO2 points. So your AO1 will be in your examples and your points, and your AO2 will be in your explanation of why this is the case, and then linking that to what it really means in the real world. Now, once again, this is a 12-mark question, so you do not need to have an introduction. The good thing about this question is you have an opportunity to bring in everything from global politics. So you could relate it to the state and globalization and internal, external sovereignty. You can relate it to global governance, political, economic, human rights, environmental. You can use power and development, or of course regionalism. So there is an opportunity to bring in everything from global politics, and that includes your examples. Now, it is only a 12-mark question, so we're looking at 3 paragraphs, which I hope is clear. And instead of your introduction as stated, there is no introduction, so it's 3 paragraphs and no introduction. And each paragraph should start with an identification of the difference or whatever is in the question. Now, there are a couple of things that are going to make your life a lot easier, particularly when answering these questions. The first thing is a synoptic link. So if you do not have a synoptic link, then you can say that you are okay with getting 9 out of 12. And 9 out of 12 is 75%. It's not a bad grade, but just having that knowledge means, okay, I need to link this to other things. Now, this has to be linked clearly to the ideologies from paper 1. It cannot link to the ideologies from paper 2, or it can, but you won't get marks for that, because the ideologies from paper 1 are compulsory. So you can link it to liberalism, you can link it to socialism, and of course you can link it to conservatism. And one of the key thinkers that we did for realism was Hobbes, who is also a conservative. And so that's usually quite an easy link to use. However, if you do not have good knowledge of conservatism and you say, oh, well, the reason why realists believe that war is inevitable is because of their negative view of human nature, and this is what Hobbes believes too, you're not going to get a mark for that. It does have to be a detailed link to paper 1 ideologies. Of course, you're going to have a paper on that anyway, and that's going to be your first exam, so it shouldn't be too difficult for you to be able to just make those links. And of course, I will show you examples shortly. So there are some non-negotiables that I'd like to talk about quickly. First of all, some of these questions are complicated. So yes, you could have a question that asks you to analyze the difference between how they see war and conflict, but you could also get a question with how they see human nature and power, or how they see power and conflict. So a question might ask you to deal with two different things. You have to, it is a non-negotiable. You have to talk about everything in the question. If you don't, your marks are really going to be limited. The other thing that you need to do is to link to key thinkers. I've said this many times. Get some key thinker flashcards, particularly for realism and liberalism, and use these because you want to be able to talk about the fact that Morgenthau has a very pessimistic view of human nature, or the fact that Kenneth Waltz doesn't believe that realist as states we should be offensive because this could actually lead to war, and therefore talks about more of a defensive neo-structural view of world affairs. So key thinkers are of course key. Examples, so these are going to be real life examples. It is always nice to have these. You do not need to have a plethora of examples. However, having at least one or two examples to exemplify your points will help you out in terms of AO1, whether or not this is linking it to the existence of different institutions. Essentially, you are showing your knowledge. You aren't just taking it from a textbook and that's it. You're able to apply it to what you have learned in the rest of global politics. And as I said, explaining the implications. So once you've given me your point, you've identified your point, you've given me examples of the point, you've then explained its implications. So that could be, this means that for realists, it's important to do A, B, or C. However, another consequence of this in a multipolar world could be more of a struggle for power or something like that. So just thinking about not just leaving it as a, this is what realists think, here's my example, moving on. It's what are those implications, and being able to compare them, because this is a comparison question, is very key. So they're the things that I would say you really should think about and practice as well, because some of these things don't come naturally. Of course, you need to also use political vocabulary. If you don't do that, you're just really asking the examiner to take away marks, because if you can use this vocabulary, the answer, there's more fluidity in your answer. Now I've got a couple of examples here, and I'll just quickly talk you through these. So in this question, it says, analyze the reasons why realists and liberals view the role of the nation state in global politics so differently. So this is what I would say is quite a straightforward question. You would have three different reasons why they view nation states in global politics differently. And you could start with talking about, okay, well, one of the reasons is because of how they see human nature. Another reason is how they see power and security. Another reason is how they see the importance of state actors or the state system in an anarchical world. And you could also bring in anarchical society here as well, because it is, although it's not realism or liberalism, it does, as I said, it's kind of that middle way. And showing that knowledge is never going to be a bad thing. Second one, analyze the reasons why realists and liberals view the acquisition of power in international relations in different ways. So once again, this is asking you to give three reasons essentially why the acquisition of power in international relations is different. A nice caveat that I would say, or something that you could always add, is looking at the neo theories. So both neoliberal and neo-realists, they tend to merge or converge closer to the middle on some of these issues, and having a paragraph on that whilst you talk about, well, classical assumptions are like this and there are big key issues here. However, whilst they're still different, neo-realists and neoliberals seem to be a bit more similar because of this, is a good thing to do as well. So another one, analyze the difference between the realist concept of security dilemma and the liberal concept of complex interdependence. This is one that I would say is a little bit more difficult, and it's why I said you need to relate to each part of the question, because here not only do you have to talk about the security dilemma and why realists believe in the security dilemma, you also have to talk about complex interdependence. Now, both of these are from two different theorists. So, the security dilemma being by John Herz in the 1950s. And of course, that's realist. And then we've got complex interdependence, and that's the 1970s. And that's Keohane and Nye. If you did not mention these people, particularly Keohane and Nye, as John Herz is not one of the people in the specification, then that would be quite problematic. But essentially, you're doing the same thing. Why do realists believe in the security dilemma? Why don't liberals believe in the security dilemma? Why do liberals believe in complex interdependence? Why are realists quite skeptical of that? The last one here, I believe that we have is analyze the difference between the realist and the liberal concepts of order and security. Now, of course, you could talk about order and then security in separate paragraphs, or you could just have three main reasons why order and security is seen differently by realists and liberals. Once again, it's 3 paragraphs needed. So what I have here is a page from the Edexcel revision guide. It is the orange book, and this question is looking at the likelihood of war and conflict in global politics. Before you continue to watch the rest of this video, just think about how you would answer this, how you would approach this question, and essentially whether or not you could have 3 different reasons. So I will start. First of all, in analysing the likelihood of war and conflict in global politics, both realists and liberals turn to human nature to enable them to understand the behaviour of states. Starting with human nature is always going to help you out because it gives you one thing to talk about already. And the thing is, they disagree because of how they view human nature. So it's never going to be incorrect, but you do have to then link this to the likelihood of war and conflict. I shouldn't say never going to be incorrect. Could be. Classical realists like Morgenthau are pessimistic about human nature and draw heavily on the thinking of Thomas Hobbes. In line with Hobbes, they see human nature as driven by a restless desire for power, not intellect and reason. So this is our synoptic link. It could be, I'd say even better if it had a quote and perhaps one further line, but this will do. As states are created by humanity, they exhibit the same traits as human nature and their constant desire to dominate, and this can only lead to war and conflict between states. Therefore, this is what they believe, and this is because of their belief in human nature. This is the implication. We are going to have conflict between states. So in contrast, liberal theory has an optimistic rather than a pessimistic view of human nature. Drawing on liberalism, synoptic link, liberals view states like humans as self-interested, but also guided by intellect and reason. This is where you link to Locke because of rationality. And of course, a quote if possible. Now, this means that there is a moral dimension to human behavior and relationships between states. And relationships between states are built on reason, not force, leading to cooperation rather than conflict and war. So as you can see, they've started with the reason. They've said human nature. They've then linked it to conservatism and its implication. Then they've done the same. Human nature, linked it to liberalism and the implication. So, the only thing missing is that kind of link back to what that really looks like in the world. But hopefully you have a good idea of where to start. So it then continues. Liberals see international order as one of complex interdependence. The creation of multiple channels between states and non-state actors that connect society brings order to security to global politics as conflict is resolved through discussions, cooperation, and negotiations, not force. So once again, here's my other reason. Because of this kind of more positive view of human nature, we then have other implications. So we don't have war and conflict because we have complex interdependence. Now, once again, here. This emergence of intergovernmental organizations such as the UN, WTO, and ICJ reflects this growing interdependence and reveals that it is rational, key word, for states to work together as together they achieve more. Now, this is where you should be linking to your theorists. So you could talk about Rousseau. Stag hunt. Of course, we've already mentioned complex interdependence, so we should be talking about Keohane and Nye. So then it contrasts it. Realists oppose this view as they believe that states are only actors in global politics and are interested in relative, not absolute gains, key words. So they are unlikely to cooperate meaningfully or over a long period of time. This is where those of you trying to get those higher marks, showing your AO1 at level 4, you're going to give me examples. So only cooperating from a period of time. There are lots of examples. There are lots of examples. Trump leaving the Paris Peace Agreement, of course, then rejoining it under Biden, but also what Trump says about NATO, etc. So yes, these kind of institutions can lead to peace, but realists are right when they say they kind of use these in a self-interested way, which doesn't take away from liberalism, because liberals do say that we are self-interested, but we are rational enough to understand that if we work together, things will be better. So for them, states are constantly striving for power, creating a system of international anarchy. However, for realists, this does not make war inevitable. The likelihood of war and conflict is driven by the balance of power system, more keywords in the system, with bipolarity, as in the Cold War era. Example, reducing the chances while unbalanced multipolarity increases the chances. This is linking to power and development, our first topic, technically topic 4. For realists like Mearsheimer, key thinker, the emergence of China is a threat to its immediate neighbors like Russia and Japan, as well as the USA. Its rise will create an unbalanced multipolar world with an intense security dilemma that would increase the chance of conflict and war. Now, as stated, you're going to need to have 3 different points. So I'd like you to think about what your third point might be. Essentially, point number 1 was human nature. I'll write it here. Point number 2, on the other hand, is looking at this idea of complex interdependence. And then point number 3, what would it be? So what I'm going to do is, anyone who'd like to comment with a third point, that would be good. I'm trying to use the same sort of context, would be useful. So I am going to look at a question with you and essentially show you how I would answer this question. And it's one of the questions that I've previously put up as one of the examples. So the question is, analyze why the reasons, and we're going to need 3. Realists and liberals view the role of the nation state in global politics so differently. So this, as I said, you can link it to lots of different ideas essentially, but hopefully, as you now know, the first one that's going to be the foundation of your answer is going to be because of human nature. If we use human nature as our first point, it just sets us up for a way to first of all get lots of the synoptic links out of the way, but also to show your understanding. And I won't repeat the points because they're going to be very similar. Now, a second point that I would talk about would be anarchy, the realist belief in anarchy and the state system, linking this to sovereignty and the importance of both internal and external, however paradoxical. And then I would talk about liberalism, while they're actually happy to pool sovereignty. That's my contrast. Of course, a good example being the EU, despite the Brexit backlash. This idea of the supranational authority. And remember, we do have to refer back to the implications. So, of course, distrust. And the lack of authority. States have to protect citizens. Self-help, all of these keywords that we've used previously. Okay. This whole idea of anarchy is always going to link to power, but you could do power as a separate paragraph. And this is this idea of power maximization, particularly by classical liberals. Sorry, classical realists, not liberals. Apologies. Now, so for the third point, we could talk about, so we've done anarchy, the pooling of sovereignty, the role of IGOs and non-governmental organizations. The kind of rise, this is for liberals, the rise of collective dilemmas, global commons, etc. And the fact that cooperation is necessary. Whereas for the realists, because of human nature, because of the kind of primacy of the state system, they reject this idea that international governmental organizations, non-governmental organizations, and other actors can and will protect citizens. And therefore, it is the main goal of the state to do so. So hopefully this helps you to think about how you can answer questions, and also not just how to answer the questions, but hopefully some quick fix ways for you to be able to build your answers so that they will be level 4 in the very end. So I hope this video has been useful. Any questions, of course, I am always here to help, and just let me know.